does a married man choose to have an affair?
It's a question that rarely gets answered honestly in couples therapy, even though the truth is actually quite predictable. A man's infidelity is not an accident, but a conscious decision. Behind it are psychological mechanisms that repeat so often, you could almost write a manual about them. It is not a moment of weakness or an uncontrollable impulse. An affair requires planning, organization, excuses, time, and money. It's a project, not an accident. I've seen countless men come into my office with devastated wives, saying, "I don't know how this happened." Of course, they know. They know exactly when it started, where they met, and which lies they told. This selective memory is nothing more than a defense mechanism to avoid taking responsibility. It was the same with Roberto, a 42-year-old engineer, married for 17 years, father of 2 teenagers. His wife had discovered messages exposing his affair, and he broke down in tears, convinced he truly loved her. And maybe he did, in his own twisted way, because many men who cheat really believe they love their wives. For them, these are 2 separate worlds, 2 needs that supposedly have nothing to do with each other, until they eventually collide, and everything falls apart. Psychology calls this cognitive dissonance, the state in which the mind must hold 2 contradictory beliefs at the same time. I love my wife, and I cheat on her regularly, are statements that don't fit together. To survive this inner conflict, the man begins to justify himself. He tells himself stories in which he is not the perpetrator but the victim. A misunderstood man whose needs his wife supposedly no longer fulfills. And society helps him do it, not openly, but through old, deeply rooted beliefs. Men are just like that. He has his needs. She let herself go. You still hear such sentences today, as if testosterone were an excuse for lies and betrayal. As if marriage were a contract, valid only until boredom or temptation appear. When you look deeper into the psyche of the married man, you see that many don't act out of desire, but out of emotional emptiness. Their marriage has turned into a kind of household partnership. Who drives the kids? Who pays which bill? When is the next school meeting? Between all the obligations, emotional intimacy has vanished. These men are not just looking for sex. They want someone who sees them, who cares about them, who makes them feel alive again. A lover represents a return to a time when they felt desirable and free, before routine and daily life suffocated their vitality. A patient named Patricia, 54, told me she didn't discover her husband's affair through messages or suspicious evidence, but through his expression. He suddenly talked about work with excitement, about projects, about a new colleague. There was a spark in his eyes she hadn't seen in years. It was the first sign, the quiet reawakening of an energy their marriage had long lost. When Patricia finally confronted him, he said something that deeply hurt her. "She makes me feel alive again." In that sentence lay the tragedy of their marriage. To him, Patricia had become a symbol of routine, while the other woman gave him back the feeling of being someone again. Many men seek exactly that in an affair. a revival of their ego. They see in the mirror an aging face, a body that is changing, responsibilities that weigh on them. Youth has passed while they were busy functioning. The lover, often younger, becomes a mirror confirming they are still attractive, desirable, strong. It's a self-esteem high, fueled by dopamine, the chemical of pleasure and reward. Every meeting, every secret message triggers that brief rush, like gambling or a piece of chocolate. But the effect never lasts long. After a few months, the lover also becomes part of the routine, and the cycle starts again. Many become addicted to this feeling of a fresh beginning and mistake it for love, even though it's merely biochemical escape. Another type of man seeks revenge in the affair. He carries old hurts, a mocking remark, a phase without intimacy, the success of his wife that made him feel small. Instead of talking, he wants to secretly restore the balance. Like Javier, a 50-year-old accountant whose wife, a lawyer, earned 3 times as much and traveled often. He felt unnecessary and sought comfort with his secretary, who admired him and made him feel needed. For him, it wasn't betrayal, but justice. In truth, it was only an attempt to reclaim power he would never have lost if he had learned to express his insecurity. What fascinates and worries me most is the ability many men have to run these two lives in parallel. They love their families, care for their children, play the role of devoted husband, and at the same time live a relationship that contradicts all of it. It's as if they have separate rooms in their mind that must never touch. This splitting of the self is clinically interesting, but humanly tragic. A person with integrated values couldn't bear it, but many men learn early to divide themselves. The self at home, the self at work, the self with friends, and eventually the self with the lover. And then there is the topic almost no one openly addresses: sex. Some men start an affair because they say their wife no longer wants sex, but often the issue is different. It's not that she doesn't want sex, but that she wants it differently. Long-term sexuality requires openness, communication, vulnerability. It requires talking about desires, fantasies, boundaries. But many men avoid exactly these conversations. They prefer someone new who validates them, instead of discussing their longings with their own partner. One man once told me his lover did things in bed his wife would never do. When I asked whether he had ever asked his wife for these things, he was silent for a long time. Then he said quietly, "I can't ask her that. She's the mother of my children." In that sentence lies the whole dilemma. The wife must remain pure and respectable. The lover may be sensual and free, 2 women to compensate for an inner immaturity. But a double life always comes at a price. Constant hiding, lying, planning, the fear of being discovered. All this leads to stress, sleeplessness, inner exhaustion. The body pays what the conscience suppresses. Things become especially dangerous with narcissistic men. For them, infidelity is not a moral issue, but a right. Their wife is there to manage the home, The lover is there to admire them. Both are characters in a theater that revolves only around them. If one character becomes inconvenient, they replace her. They don't feel remorse, only anger when their perfect public image collapses. And finally, there's the question of the lover. Some women don't know the man is married and become victims of his lies. Others know and stay anyway. Some because they have low self-esteem and believe a piece of him is better than nothing. Others because they enjoy the game, the thrill, the power, and some because they truly believe he will leave his wife one day. But the truth is almost always the same. A story that begins in secret rarely ends in peace. They live in a fantasy fed by empty promises. I've had many women in my practice who were the other woman. One of them, Marcella, 32, was in a relationship with a married man for 4 years. Whenever I asked why she settled for scraps, she answered, "But he really loves me. His marriage is dead." That sentence, "his marriage is dead," is the mantra of every mistress. It's the story that frees her from guilt. If the marriage was already dead, she didn't destroy it. She merely arrived after the wreckage. Convenient, isn't it? The uncomfortable truth is, a marriage is rarely as dead as the unfaithful man claims. It may be asleep, neglected, in crisis, but not dead, and that's the difference. Many wives discover the infidelity and are completely shocked because they did not see their relationship as over. Yes, there were problems, routine, distance, but between a troubled marriage and a systematic lie lies a deep abyss. Let's return to the psychological mechanisms of the unfaithful man. The first is repression. This isn't really happening. It's only temporary. It doesn't mean anything. The second is rationalization. My wife pushed me to this. Any man in my situation would do the same. The third is projection. He accuses his wife of being cold, distant, uninterested, even though he is the one who has emotionally withdrawn in order to justify his behavior. Many men fail to understand that infidelity is not a sign of a bad marriage, but a sign of a person who cannot tolerate his own internal conflicts. I have seen catastrophic marriages in which neither partner cheats, and seemingly happy ones in which one of them does. Infidelity says more about the character of the perpetrator than about the state of the relationship. What breaks my heart the most is seeing intelligent, successful, wonderful women tear themselves apart, trying to understand what they did wrong. I'm not attractive enough. I should have been more patient. I worked too much. They look for the fault in themselves, while the problem lies in him, in his inability to communicate honestly, to truly commit, or to address conflicts openly. Here is a bitter truth you should remember. You cannot compete with a fantasy. The mistress is a fantasy. She sees the man only in his best moments, shaved, cheerful, smelling good. With time and charm, she does not experience the reality. Him with the flu, stressed from work, annoyed by bills, or plunging a clogged toilet at 2 in the morning. The mistress lives in part-time romance mode. The wife lives the reality 24/7. And when the man compares, He compares his everyday life to his idealized escape world. Of course, the fantasy wins. But give that fantasy 3 years of real life together, and you will see passion turn into routine. Neuroplasticity shows us that the brain adapts to every stimulus. The extraordinary becomes ordinary. Passion becomes habit. That's biology, not romance. And then there are the signs many women overlook or choose not to see. The sudden password on the phone, the new business trips, the rediscovered enthusiasm for the gym, new clothes, increased attention to appearance, the reduced, or paradoxically increased, sexual interest, often an attempt to compensate for guilt. Communication changes, too. The man who used to tell everything suddenly becomes evasive. The phone always lies face down. Calls are taken outside. The browser history is regularly deleted. Late arrivals become more frequent, accompanied by overly detailed explanations, because the novice liar believes details make the story credible, when in fact they make it more suspicious. But here lies the real tragedy. Many women sense the signs but choose not to see them. It's psychological self-defense. As long as she doesn't say the truth out loud, she can keep going, because the truth would mean making decisions, confronting him, seeking therapy, perhaps ending the marriage, reorganizing her whole life. It's easier to convince herself that he is just tired, stressed, or overworked. This silent agreement, she senses it but asks no questions, and he lies but leaves traces, creates a sick dynamic in which both become accomplices to the lie. And the children, they sense everything. They are perfect detectors of emotional tension. Even if they don't know the details, they absorb the restlessness, soak up the atmosphere of the home, like sponges. After 30 years of clinical experience, I can tell you one thing. Children do not forget the truth that is kept from them. They carry it, unspoken, as weight into their own lives. The moment a man decides to have a mistress is the moment he decides that his own needs matter more than the well-being of his family. It is a selfish decision that cannot be romanticized or justified. You can have serious marital problems and still choose ethical options. Talking, going to therapy together, or separating honestly. Infidelity is always a deliberate choice, and that choice reveals something fundamental about character. It shows that integrity is negotiable for this person, that promises hold only as long as they serve him, and that his word means nothing once it becomes inconvenient. This is the most important thing you should remember. A man who looks you in the eyes for months or years, while simultaneously living a secret life, is someone you cannot trust in any area of your life. Now let's address the delicate question of whether a marriage can survive an affair. The answer is, it depends. It depends on whether the unfaithful partner truly feels remorse, or only regrets being caught. It depends on whether he is willing to do the deep therapeutic work required. It also depends on whether the wife can forgive without falling into paranoid control. And it depends on whether both truly want to rebuild, or are merely postponing the inevitable. I have seen marriages that survived an affair and even grew stronger afterward. But that is rare. It requires an extraordinary level of honesty, emotional work, and commitment that most people are not willing to give. It is easier to divorce or to continue in a kind of zombie marriage in which trust never truly returns. If you decide to stay, it must never be out of fear. Neither fear of being alone nor financial dependence. You must stay because you genuinely believe it is worth it, and because he has shown through actions, not words, that he has changed. Words are cheap, and unfaithful men become poets when they're caught. I love you. It was a mistake. It will never happen again. But love is proven through transparency, shared passwords, open access to accounts, verifiable daily routines, individual and couples therapy, and above all, patience with your emotions, even with your anger. And if after all that you realize that you can never trust again, that something is irreparably broken, then you have every right to leave. Forgiveness is not mandatory. Reconciliation is not mandatory. Staying in a marriage that destroys you inside does not make you virtuous. It makes you a prisoner of your fear of change. In cognitive behavioral therapy, there is a concept I value deeply: irrational beliefs. Many women remain trapped in marriages because they believe such things as, marriage is forever, no matter what. I must endure for the children. At my age, I won't find anyone else. Divorce is a failure. All this nonsense has been ingrained in you since childhood, and now it keeps you trapped in a life you do not deserve. Children do not need a mother who sacrifices herself in a toxic marriage. They need a woman who models self-worth and healthy boundaries. They need to see that trust has consequences when it is broken, and that self-respect is non-negotiable. If you stay for the children, you teach them that they too must endure betrayal in their future relationships. And this idea that you won't find anyone because you're 50 or 60, forget it. I have seen women of all ages rebuild their lives after divorce and flourish. Some found wonderful new partners, others discovered they were happier alone, without cooking for someone who cheated on them, or pretending to be satisfied just to keep the peace. Divorce is not a failure. It is an outcome. Relationships sometimes end, and that does not erase the good years. But staying in a relationship that destroys your soul just because you fear the unknown, that is the real failure. Let me be perfectly clear. If your husband has a mistress, the problem is not you. You can have flaws like every human being. You may have neglected your relationship, but nothing, absolutely nothing, justifies betrayal. If he was unhappy, he had the duty to tell you before seeking comfort in another woman's arms. You must be careful with couples therapy in which the therapist tries to distribute blame evenly. Statements like, "She wasn't really present anymore," or "he felt rejected," sound compassionate, but they obscure the truth. Infidelity is 100% the responsibility of the person who cheats. Marital problems can be shared, but the decision to betray is made by one person alone. I have dismissed patients from my practice more than once when I realized they were only looking for validation for their excuses. I am not an accomplice to dishonesty. My job is to help you see reality, not to build moral sandcastles in which your betrayal appears as an understandable reaction to difficult circumstances. After discovering an affair, the betrayed partner usually goes through several phases. First comes shock. She cannot believe what she is hearing. The pain is so intense that the mind partly detaches. Many women describe it as if they were watching the scene from outside their own body. Then comes bargaining. If you end contact, we can make it. If we go to therapy, I'll give it another try. She clings to the hope of restoring the old normality, even if that normality was built on lies, like trying to move back into a house that has already burned down. Then comes anger, the kind of anger that makes you want to burn his clothes, scratch the car, or call the mistress and say everything you feel. Anger is healthy. It's the immune system of the soul shouting, "Defend yourself. This was wrong." It becomes problematic when that anger turns inward and becomes depression. Many women experience deep sadness after the anger phase. They feel worthless, guilty, lose their appetite, sleep too little or too much. Infidelity is a real emotional shock, a trauma that can trigger symptoms like flashbacks, mistrust, anxiety, and hyperarousal. And eventually, with time and help, acceptance arrives. This does not mean that what happened is okay. It only means the woman integrates the experience into her life, learns from it, makes decisions, and moves forward, with or without her partner. This process often takes years, not weeks. Trust cannot be rebuilt with 3 months of therapy and 2 romantic dinners. It's like porcelain. You can glue it, but the cracks remain visible. Another rarely discussed topic is the mistress who makes demands. Some women are not satisfied with leftovers. They want the man to leave his wife and set ultimatums. Choose her or me. Suddenly the man's double life begins to wobble. He never intended to give up his marriage. The mistress was an addition, not a replacement, but she read the script differently. She truly fell in love, or got tired of living in the shadows. Now he is caught between 2 fires, a wife who suspects the truth and a mistress who demands clarity. Many men behave ridiculously at this stage. They promise the mistress they will leave soon. They just need some time. Time that turns into months, years, even decades. At the same time, they beg their wives. It wasn't serious. It's over. She meant nothing. One lie after another, until they themselves no longer know what is true. When the mistress eventually has enough and leaves, the man falls into a void. He loses his daily dose of dopamine, his emotional refuge. He mourns the mistress while assuring his wife that he's fully committed to the marriage, and often the wife believes the relationship is improving, while in reality, he is grieving the loss of his secret life. Then there are men who are addicted to infidelity. They don't have one mistress. They have many, one after another. As soon as one affair ends, the next begins, always the same cycle. The thrill of conquest, the intensity of the first months, the emerging routine, the craving for a new stimulus. It is an addiction, a constant hunt for the next dopamine hit. These men are almost impossible to change. They swear they'll improve, attend therapy, read books, but they enjoy their double life too much. They love the feeling of being desired, the sense of power in leading several lives at once. For them, monogamy is prison and infidelity is freedom. If you discover that your partner belongs to this category, don't waste your time trying to save him. You are neither his therapist nor his savior. Such men could change only if they truly wanted to, and most do not. They remain trapped in their destructive pattern until age or illness set limits that their will never could. And yes, women cheat too, less frequently, but it happens, usually for different reasons. While men often seek validation and adventure, women tend to seek emotional connection. It doesn't make the betrayal better or worse, but the psychological mechanisms differ. What repeatedly fascinates me in practice is the human ability for self-justification. I have patients who explain in detail why their infidelity was understandable or even necessary. We haven't had sex in a year. She only cares about the children. We live like roommates. All of this may be true, and yet the only ethical response remains. Talk about it, or end the relationship. But talking requires vulnerability. It requires saying, I am unhappy. I need closeness. I want us to work on this. And many men would rather die than admit such things. Toxic ideas of masculinity have taught them that neediness is weakness, that asking is humiliation. So they choose the path of cowardice, betrayal, instead of the path of honesty. Starting an affair when the marriage is in crisis is like putting a Band-Aid on a gangrenous wound. It heals nothing. It only delays the inevitable and worsens the infection. If your marriage isn't working, work on it or leave. But don't build a world of lies in which you hope that cheating will somehow fix things on its own. And to all the mistresses who believe he will leave his wife one day, listen carefully. Numbers don't lie. Less than 5% of married men actually leave their wives for their mistresses. And of those few couples, most end up in relationships just as problematic as the marriage they escaped from, because they never resolved their own internal conflicts. They just changed the scenery. And what happens when a man really does leave his wife? The mistress stops being the mistress and becomes the wife. The secret excitement, the spark of the forbidden. It all disappears suddenly. She is the one dealing with his morning grumpiness, his dirty socks, his debts, and his mother-in-law. Fantasy collides with reality, and reality almost always wins. I have worked with many second wives who were once mistresses. They come into therapy desperate because he is distant, travels a lot, or because they suspect he is cheating again. And when we go through the story, it becomes clear he is repeating the exact same pattern as before. The problem was never the first wife. The problem was always him. There is a saying I love. If he cheats on his wife with you, he will one day cheat on you with someone else. People do not magically change their behavior. just because they change partners. Only genuine inner work transforms a person, and most avoid it their entire lives. Another topic is the warning signs many women overlook early on. The man who later becomes unfaithful often showed the tendencies long before marriage. He flirted with others, and you dismissed it as, "He's just charming." He had close female friends with blurry boundaries, but you didn't want to seem suspicious. He openly checked out other women, and you told yourself, all men do that. In this way, we normalize behaviors that are actually signs of immaturity and lack of commitment. One of my patients told me that her then-boyfriend openly flirted with other women at parties, even before the wedding. When she brought it up, he made her look ridiculous. "You're just too jealous." 20 years later, she discovered he had had 3 affairs. The signs were always there. She just didn't want to see them because she was in love, because she wanted to believe he was different, and because she was afraid of being alone. This is one of the most important lessons. When someone shows you who they truly are, believe them. Don't try to paint a better version of that person in your mind. Don't tell yourself, "He will change once we're married," or "He will mature eventually." People change only if they truly want to and actively work on it, not because you believe in them hard enough. Let's return to the central question. Why does a married man choose to have a mistress in the first place? We have already discussed many reasons. Emotional emptiness, the need for validation, dopamine addiction, revenge, narcissism, internal fragmentation. But there is another reason that is simpler and at the same time more painful. Because he can. Even in the 21st century, we still live in a culture with a double moral standard. An unfaithful man is seen as a ladies' man, an unfaithful woman as a disgrace. A man with a mistress is admired for his masculinity. A woman with a lover is condemned. These social codes give men freedoms that women simply do not have. Many men grow up believing that multiple conquests are a sign of success and power. Movies, music, jokes, everything reinforces this idea. Marriage then becomes a cage from which one must secretly escape to feel alive. Ironically, these same men become violently jealous at the mere suspicion that their wives might be unfaithful. Their sense of possession is inversely proportional to their own loyalty. They demand total freedom for themselves, but absolute fidelity from their partner. It is pure hypocrisy, but hypocrisy that works in their favor. And today, technology plays a crucial role. Dating apps, disappearing messages, private video calls. It has never been easier to lead a double life. The man doesn't even need to meet the mistress physically. They can text all day long while he sits next to his wife on the couch. In the evening, I have treated men who maintained emotional or even erotic online relationships that felt just as real to them as physical affairs. Sexting, photos, videos, intimate conversations, all while their wife was in the next room, completely unaware. The line between fantasy and betrayal has become blurred, but one thing remains clear. Anything you hide because you know your partner would see it as betrayal is betrayal. Many say, "We didn't have sex, we only wrote messages." But emotional intimacy with another woman while shutting out your own wife is also infidelity. Betrayal is not only physical, it is emotional, temporal, and energetic. It is energy taken away from the marriage and given to someone else. And all of this does not remain without consequences for the children. Many unfaithful parents believe their children don't notice anything. But children sense tension even when they don't understand the words. They feel the distance, the lies, the unrest between their parents. And when they later learn the truth, and they almost always do, their inner image of the family shatters. I have treated adult children who discovered years later that their father had affairs throughout their childhood. They feel betrayed, as if their entire past was a lie. Was anything ever real? They ask. The betrayal retroactively poisons their most beautiful memories. The vacations where Dad smiled were perhaps only camouflage. The family celebrations, the shared laughter, suddenly everything feels false. This creates a secondary trauma that often follows them for life and deeply damages their ability to trust in their own relationships. And then there is the financial cost, because an affair costs money. Hotels, gifts, dinners, secret phones, sometimes even separate apartments. In many cases, this money comes directly from the family budget. Money intended for the children's education, home repairs, or the couple's retirement. The family pays the price for the father's ego. I have seen women discover during divorce proceedings that there were secret accounts, hidden credit cards, undeclared loans. The man had not only cheated emotionally, but also financially. He robbed his own family to fund his affair. That is a level of selfishness that is hard to comprehend. I am often asked whether infidelity can be prevented. The honest answer is, only to a limited extent. You cannot control another person's decisions. If someone is determined to cheat, he will find a way. No matter how perfect you are as a partner, but you can create conditions that reduce temptation. This means keeping emotional and physical closeness alive, openly discussing needs without fear of judgment, making time for each other beyond parenting duties and daily routines, maintaining respect, curiosity, and mutual admiration. But be careful. This does not mean that infidelity is your fault if it happens. That narrative is toxic and false. You can do everything right and still be betrayed, because infidelity is not an inevitable result of an imperfect marriage. It is a personal decision. What you can do is choose your partner consciously. Look closely before committing. Pay attention to his character, his integrity, how he handles conflict, and how he treats people when he has nothing to gain. A man who lies to his boss, cheats on his taxes, or is dishonest in small things will one day be dishonest in big things too. Character is not situational. You either have integrity or you don't. Of course, we all make mistakes, but there is a vast difference between a one-time lapse that evokes remorse and a pattern that repeats itself whenever it serves personal convenience. I remember Fernando. He came to therapy after his third wife caught him cheating. Yes, the third. The two before her had also left him because of infidelity. When I asked if he recognized a pattern, he replied, "I just never found the right woman." The self-deception was astonishing. 3 marriages destroyed, and it was always the wrong women. Never him. This level of denial is staggering. Such men burn through relationship after relationship instead of admitting, "I have a problem with intimacy. I don't know how to truly attach. I use women to fill an inner emptiness that only I can heal." That insight requires humility and courage, 2 qualities many unfaithful men lack. And then comes the moment of discovery, that instant when the wife finds evidence that can no longer be denied. A message on the phone, a suspicious receipt, a witness, or sometimes the mistress herself reaching out because she can no longer bear living in the shadows. In seconds, the world of the wife collapses. First comes the shock, then the avalanche of questions. Since when? How often? Do you love her? The man, caught, immediately switches into damage control. He downplays it. It was just once. He deflects. It meant nothing. He blames her. "You never had time for me." But you must understand, during the first confrontation, he will almost never tell you the full truth. He will offer the mildest version he believes you can tolerate, without leaving immediately. I call this the drip method of truth. Today he admits the messages, in 2 weeks the meeting, in a month the years-long affair. Every new revelation tears the wound open again. This is why I tell my patients, if you stay after infidelity, demand the whole truth from the beginning. Everything. How long, how often, who she is, where they met, how much money he spent. Yes, it will hurt, but better a short, intense pain than months of slow dying from half-truths. Some therapists disagree. They say too many details are re-traumatizing. I believe the opposite. Uncertainty is worse. The mind fills gaps with fantasies, and those are usually far crueler than reality. Knowledge allows you to process, integrate, and make a clear decision. Of course, there are limits. You don't need explicit sexual details, but you must understand the scope of the betrayal in order to know whether the relationship is salvageable. And here comes an uncomfortable truth. Some women choose to stay in a marriage marked by infidelity for practical reasons. Maybe they lack financial independence. Maybe they have no support system. Maybe they don't have the emotional strength to start over. And that is legitimate. A conscious adult decision based on realistic evaluation deserves respect. What is destructive, however, is staying and lying to yourself, saying everything is fine when nothing is fine, claiming I trust him, while living in constant vigilance and suspicion that leads to bitterness, depression, and eventually even physical illness. The body takes revenge for every emotion you bury. If you stay, stay with open eyes. Set clear boundaries. I am staying under these conditions. Do not become his savior or his mother. Do not monitor him 24/7. Either you trust enough to live in internal peace, or you leave. Because living in constant control and fear is not living. It is a state of chronic tension. A thought experiment I often suggest. Imagine your life in 5 years if you stay. Do you see yourself happy, calm, trusting? Or do you see yourself suspicious, exhausted, with a knot in your stomach every time he leaves the house? Then imagine your life in 5 years if you leave. Do you see uncertainty, but also peace, self-respect, freedom? Compare both images honestly. Many women realize at that moment that the image of leaving, as frightening as it seems, is also the image of healing and the image of staying, the image of slow self-dissolution. There is no universally right answer, but there is always a choice that feels more like living and less like merely surviving. In the end, everything comes down to a choice between fear and dignity. Fear keeps you tied to what is familiar, even when that familiar thing hurts. Dignity pushes you forward, even when you don't know exactly where the path leads. No one deserves to live inside a lie, to wonder every day where the truth lies and when the next lie will surface. Love without respect, honesty, and balance is not love. It is an emotional contract built on the fear of being alone. When a partner cheats, he destroys not only trust, but also the foundation of safety on which you built your life. And once you see things as they truly are, you can never return to the blindness of yesterday. So if you find yourself at a crossroads today, know this: it is not an ending. It is a beginning. Maybe painful, maybe uncertain, but true. Every woman who has survived betrayal knows that pain does not kill. It cleanses. It teaches you to recognize lies, to set boundaries, and to never again forget your own worth. And one day, when the pain has grown quieter, you will realize that you did not lose your partner. You lost an illusion, and what you gained is far more valuable: peace, strength, and the ability to love again, but this time with yourself at the top of the list.